Divers Depot wants to talk to you about gear in this new series we are starting, and today we're talking about wetsuits with EK, so come on! Here with owner-operator EK Sal of Divers Depot, who is going to be celebrating 50 years of owning and operating and being in the dive industry in Nacogdoches, Texas. He's going to talk with us a little bit about wetsuits. There's a lot of options.
There sure are. And we'll start out with what many people consider, which is a Shorty wetsuit. That's something like this. And a Shorty wetsuit is really for that occasional diver in Caribbean top waters or local lakes in the summer months. The advantage of it is the price point. Another advantage is it's pretty easy to get in and out of. Because the legs are cut off here and the arms cut off there. Basically with wetsuits, what you're looking at are cheap wetsuits. I'd rule those out. And then you have good, better, and best. And so there is a big difference between the good and the very best. Mainly, it's how comfortable those suits are. The newer suits these days are made out of a hyper-stretch neoprene type of material, which means once the suit is on, it almost adheres to your body shape. That does a couple of things too. A diver who maybe during the different times of year may put on a few pounds or take off a few pounds of weight, that suit's going to fit you well if it's sized originally for you during those periods of expansion and weight loss. So again, a Shorty wetsuit is what I would consider to be a warm water summer type suit in local lakes or Caribbean dives, Cozumel, places like that. The disadvantage of a Shorty suit, it does not provide that full body protection. Personally, that's something I look for. I like a full body coverage because it keeps you off of scrapes, cuts, burns, sunburns. All of those issues go away with a full body coverage. So when you look at full body coverage, a real popular suit is something like this. This is a 1.5 millimeter. It's called Neo Skin, which means it's a super stretch type suit. And again, long sleeve, long legs, easy to get in and out of, contours to your body, fits real well, reasonably priced. I would call this the kind of the high end of the full suits in a thinner type material. Normally when you have your other Shorty suits like this, they're going to come in at like a 2 or 2.5 millimeter suit, which is okay, but the larger suits like this start normally at 1 millimeter and then 1.5 millimeter and go up from there. Okay, so the Mac Daddy of all-round suits is something like this. This is a waterproof suit. It's a 2.5 millimeter. Notice the extravagant stitching. That means it's both stitched and glued. That means longevity for the purchaser of this suit. You have an optional place here for a pocket that you can add at a later time if you think you need a pocket. And it's made out of that super stretch material. So once you get this suit on, it's going to fit you real well. I had a customer come in recently, and I'm a pretty big guy, and the customer was actually larger, both in height and weight, than I am. And he was concerned, could we get him a suit that fit? I pulled one of my suits out of the back. He went in the dressing room, tried it on, came out, fit him like a glove. So the difference between our body weights was more than 10%. So in other words, if you size right on the front end, the suit's going to fit you now. And if you change by 10% or 12% or maybe even 15% of body weight up or down, that suit should still fit if fitted properly in the beginning. This is one of my favorite suits. Now, you can certainly go to thicker suits, and this is a waterproof 5 mil suit. And it's not for everybody because 5 mils are basically designed for cooler water. I was in a lake last month diving this suit. I spent 45 minutes underwater and 15 minutes on the surface evaluating rescue drills. So I was a full hour in the water and I never got chilled in the slightest. Well, but with suits like that, you have a baffle built in both on the arms and the legs, which means that it's going to cut off and minimize the water flow. These also come in a 7 mil suit, but that's for even the more serious cold water diver. Now let's take a moment for you, particularly if you're a novice diver, to understand how wetsuits work. Basically, a wetsuit is just that. Water goes through and underneath the suit around your body, and then your body heats that water up, so you have a thermal layer. I think it's probably more accurate to say that a wetsuit keeps you from getting cold under the right temperature ranges and circumstances. And sometimes if you're wearing too much neoprene or the water's too warm, you can actually get a little bit overheated. So we have zippers up here on the collars, or you can always flush it by opening the sleeves up a little bit and let a little water transition through it. I'd like for you to imagine what a year is like. So let's start with a January. Now in January, the water temperature in lakes around here is pretty cold. And so if you were out diving in Texas in a local lake in January or February or March, you may be up here with a 5 mil suit. However, somewhere around mid-March, some years when the water starts to heat up a little bit, this 2.5 millimeter would be an accurate suit to wear in late March, perhaps April. Now, by the same token, if you have years where the winter lasts a little bit longer, you might be in this 5 mil suit January, February, March, April, and maybe even into May. But certainly by June, most lakes in Texas, with the exception of the spring-fed lakes, you're probably back in this 2.5 millimeter suit. And even when you reach the summer months like July, August, or September, you may think, well, I'll just dive without a wetsuit on. Well, you could, but having a thermal protection of some kind, particularly if you're making multiple dives in a day, is a great idea, because you don't want to have to try to add a suit on the second or third dive because you're getting a little bit cool. Start out wearing the suit, and then toward the second or third dive, if you feel like you don't need it, then that's when you would not put that suit on. Okay, now in the fall, you have October, water starts to get cooler again. You're still probably diving this 2.5 millimeter suit. November, depends on the year. A lot of times we're diving in the 2.5 millimeter suit in November, and we've even dove it up till like the second week of December. Other years, by the first week of December, it's time to transition to the thicker 5 mil or perhaps even a 7 mil suit if you're cold natured. Now, what most people don't understand too is about dive travel. So if you're in, let's say you're going on holiday in January and you're going to the Bahamas, or you're going to Cozumel, or you're going to Grand Cayman, if you think you're going to go dive in a t-shirt, it's not going to work well. So you're back to this 2.5 millimeter suit, which is your island destination type suit during the cooler months of the year. Now, granted, when you get into June, July, August, and maybe even September, you could go with a Shorty if that's your choice, or something like this, which is the 1.5 full coverage. Some people dive skins. Skins provide no thermal insulation. I would recommend that you look at a 1 millimeter or 1.5 for the thermal and scrape, cut, and also sun protection would be my recommendation. Now let's go back to this year. Now remember, we talked about January and through the summer and through the fall. The bottom line is this: for a beginner who doesn't really know what kind of suit they should start with, the 2.5 millimeter or 3 millimeter suits are the way to go. And that way, if you look at the versatility of that suit, this is your winter go south to the Caribbean suit, it's also your transitional suit in late spring and early fall. So bang for the buck, you get more time in the water in this suit than you would like a 1.5 millimeter or even a 5 millimeter suit. Lastly, my comment is a lot of divers are not sure whether or not to purchase a thicker suit like a 5 or a 7 mil. Maybe the way to approach that is to simply rent a suit if it's just that occasional one-time need, and then consider buying when you start renting it more than that once or twice. For example, we had some customers in recently that were going to the Galapagos Islands, and a 5 millimeter or 7 millimeter suit is very recommended for the Galapagos. Well, they had purchased the 2.5s, and they were saying, gee, why can't I take my 2.5? And I said, well, you can, but you're going to be kind of chilly in the water because normally you'd be in a 5 or a 6 or a 7 suit. The old school wetsuits had two pieces to them. They were called Farmer John's or Farmer Jane's, and you had an undergarment that came up here like over your shoulders, and then a jacket that went over that. So with those suits, which were very popular 30, 40 years ago, you actually had 2 layers of 7 millimeter neoprene, 14 millimeter protection on the chest and torso. We don't see much of those anymore. Mostly these single suits have come a long way. If you buy a good one with a lot of super stretch, you're in business with enough thermal protection for cold water diving. I was in Santa Rosa, New Mexico at the Blue Hole a couple of years ago, and almost everybody there were diving in dry suits and insulated underwear. I dove in a single piece 5 millimeter suit with hood and gloves, and I wasn't cold during the whole day of diving. Some of the people in the dry suits were giving me the I'm a little cold or I'm really cold signals. So, you know, don't be misled about dry suits being better than wetsuits. It's all a personal thing that you evolve into. And dry suits are normally a lot more expensive than wetsuits are, and sometimes will require more maintenance because you have to replace the bib area and the wrist seals and maybe the ankle seals or booty type seals on those.
When it comes to wetsuits, you've got a great selection here, but for this one, the 2.5 millimeter that you talked about, what is the water temperature range that you recommend?
Yeah, basically we have charts for this, but I would normally recommend that a person that's in the 70 degree or 75 degree water temperature Fahrenheit, this would be a good recommendation. You can actually do a dive in a little bit cooler water, say down to 68, and I've had quite a few divers that'll do this suit in as low as 65. It's a little chilly, so it really depends on how many dives you're going to do and what the temperature is. So if you're just doing a little 30-minute dive at 68 degrees, this might be fine. Now, if it's a little bit less than that, you're probably going to be adding the hood and the gloves to your outfit. It's just like snow skiing. You know, people don't get cold snow skiing. They wear the right attire. Well, it's the same thing for scuba diving. You add a hood and gloves, and you've increased dramatically the amount of time you can dive underwater without getting chilly. So that's what it's all about. It's always to have that comfort zone where you feel good about the temperatures. It is generally recommended and accepted that anytime you're in water temperature that's 68 degree Fahrenheit or less, it is encouraged, and you should have on, in my opinion too, the hood and the gloves, along with whatever appropriate thickness wetsuit you plan on wearing.
That wraps up the first episode in a series talking about gear with EK Sal and Divers Depot. Join us for our next episode coming soon. Bye.